Hello, and thanks for taking the time to listen to Reimagining Cyber. New episodes of the podcast drop every Wednesday. So to make sure you never miss a show, do hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen. You can also find us on the @Reimagining Cyber YouTube channel. Hello, I'm Rob Borrego, and welcome to Reimagining Cyber. When most people hear the term cyberattack, they think about stolen data, leaked emails, or ransomware payments. But last week's Iran-linked attack against U.S. medical device company Stryker could well hint at the next wave of cyber conflict. What happens if the targets are the systems that keep society running, like the water we drink, the hospitals we rely on, and the infrastructure that keeps the lights on? Our guest today has spent over a decade sounding the alarm about the exact topic. Josh Corman is a cybersecurity strategist and the founder of I Am the Cavalry, a movement focused on the safety and security of physical cyber systems, the technologies where software and connected devices directly affect human life. He's currently leading a project at the Institute for Security Technology called Undisruptable 27, an initiative aimed at strengthening critical infrastructure, such as water systems in hospitals, before potential large-scale cyber disruption can impact them. In this conversation, Josh explains why the cybersecurity industry may be focused on the wrong problems, what nation-state cyber operations like Volt Typhoon reveal about the future of conflict, and why resilience, not just prevention, may be the most important security strategy going forward. Be warned, what you're about to hear is perhaps the most chilling of any of the conversations we've ever had on Reimagining Cyber. Josh, it's great having you back on. What we really wanted to get your perspective on is, a different viewpoint from the last time we chatted. And I think one of the ways to maybe frame this up is that when most people hear the word cyber attack, they're typically kind of thinking about things relative to, some sort of stolen data, leaked emails, what have you. But the area you're drawing a lot of attention to right now is quite different, right? So you're more so shining the light on attacks that are actually breaking things in the real world. Maybe paint a picture for the audience of what that actual shift has looked like, what you're actually focusing your attention on.
Yeah, I mean, we could have 3-hour discussion on that one. But, I founded IamTheCavalry.org. This will be our 13th birthday at Hacker Summer Camp this August. And the whole idea was our dependence on connected technology was growing faster than our ability to secure it in areas affecting public safety, human life, economic, national security. So the idea was where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, or sometimes we now call this cyber physical systems. Mm-hmm. But so much of this 30-year industry of cybersecurity has been focused on protecting the confidentiality of data.
Yeah.
If we were walking down the street in a city, tomorrow night, and we got mugged and they said your wallet or your life, we wouldn't blink and we would say, here, take my wallet, right? I want to get home to my kids, right? I can replace the money. We spend more hundreds of millions of dollars protecting credit cards. We spend nothing protecting our water supply. It is insane to me. And the reasons have been, why do that William Sutton quote of why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. Mm-hmm. So we have a long history of financially motivated adversaries going after confidentiality of data. And specifically, we prioritize the regulated data where there might be fines like PCI or HIPAA.
Sure.
But the world has changed. There's different predators with different appetites. So we were always prey, and now we have predators in the nation state or disruption and destruction camp. So we're really poorly suited and poorly invested in the targets like lifeline critical functions, like the water you drink, the food you put on your table. Does the lights go on when you flip the switch? Can you get timely access to patient care? And we kind of know this. We've seen that the top target of ransomware has been hospitals, but it was still financially motivated. But in a stark contrast of people who want money going after data, we now have people who want disruption and destruction going after our lifeline infrastructure. And we're just not ready for that fight. Our best practices arguably aren't best anymore, but they're really implicitly biased towards other things. And I think there's a huge reckoning coming on, do we have the right posture and attitude? And I think it's going to take years for our talent pool to reorient, but some of us are critical thinkers and have a head start through I Am the Cavalry, through CyberMed Summit. I did some work for the I ran the federal response for Operation Warp Speed for CISA, the cybersecurity agency during the pandemic. Like, we have a better appreciation of the things that matter most there. It's things like availability. We use the word resilience as almost a search and replace for cyber, but it's not. It's not, we have this concept in the enterprise where, well, you can never stop the breach. So let's just focus on restore and recover. But how do you restore and recover, a $250,000 water pump?
Sure.
That takes 6 to 9 months to order a new one. And you probably broke all 3 of them that you use because they're all the same make and model and same exposure. So I think we'll get through this through our chat, I'm sure. But I think we're in an era where we have to look at ruthless prioritization on the highest consequence failures that are within reach of our enemies. Pay very close attention when they tell us what they're going to hit, when they're going to hit it, how they're going to hit it. We should believe them. Like the Maya Angelou quote, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. And we should be sure that we've thought through, how do we mitigate the highest consequence failures? And how do we have contingency plans where we fail to do so? And we'll get through that. I know it's going to be heavy, but I respect your audience. I respect you. And you deserve the candor and as much time to digest and prepare as possible.
No, and I appreciate that, Josh. And I know we had a conversation before, coming here to chat today about kind of the reality of the story. And you asked me straight up, right? Hey, it's real. And are you comfortable, having me share the reality of it? And we said, yeah, this is what this is about, right? Coming in and giving people the real world views, the perspectives. And also, again, most importantly, coming out of that towards the end of the conversation of what should they be thinking about doing to get ahead of this as much as possible. But one of the things I want to kind of jump into is seeing tons and tons about Typhoon campaigns, right? Just for the audience in general, it's always good to just kind of, do the one-on-one, like break it down for us. And how is it different, right? How is it different than the traditional kind of what we've seen in the past run-of-the-mill hacking operations out there?
Yeah, well, first off, I hate the Typhoon naming. It's probably done more harm than any other naming scheme I've seen, just because there are a lot of Typhoons. They're not all equal. One of them is particularly outrageous. One of them gets a little bit more air cover. The top 2 that you hear about are Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon. Volt Typhoon is outrageous, and I'm going to give you the skinny on Volt Typhoon unless you ask me about the rest. So let me give you the shortest, best 101 I can on this. On January 31st of 2024, the top 4 leaders of cyber went to Congress in an unclassified briefing and told the world about Volt Typhoon. To me, it's outrageous. Volt Typhoon, unlike the other Typhoons, is a military unit in the People's Liberation Army for the Chinese Communist Party. China has intentions to take Taiwan as early as 2027, hence part of the project name we're going to get to. They would like the U.S. to stay out of their fight. And if you've heard the term or read the book, Unrestricted Warfare, from their military leaders, it tells you how they think and how they fight. And as part of their unrestricted warfare doctrine, Volt Typhoon specifically has 2 objectives. On the military side, they want to delay and degrade our force of mobilization, or the movement of troops and equipment, to Taiwan, even by a day or 2, would give them a humongous advantage. So they want to delay and degrade our force mobilization. But the one that scares me is they want to sow chaos on U.S. non-combatant civilian infrastructure to undermine public support, to have us focus inward and undermine public support for our intervention. So it is all the international, laws of armed conflict. This is just way beyond the line. So there's stupid phrases we use in the government like pre-positioning, but let me just lay it out for you.
Yeah.
Volt Typhoon has been found in U.S. water and power and a couple other lifeline infrastructure functions. They're just sitting there. They're not doing anything. It's like placing a digital remote detonation bomb, but we haven't pulled the trigger yet. And it's sitting there laying in wait for a time and place they're choosing, most likely associated with the Taiwan conflict. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I can get into consequence management, but that's the skinny is we may have a conflict as early as 2027. They want us to stay out of it, and they will either hit us a little to slow us down or hit us as a retaliation if we start to get involved. And by the way, we have to get involved. All of our chips come from there, and it's an ally. So is that clear?
100% clear.
Yeah.
Couldn't be clearer. And thanks for doing really at that kind of one-on-one level, just explaining it head on as to what the impact could be. And you also connected into kind of the next thing I wanted to delve into, just maybe another layer down, is all the talk about 2027. So you kind of framed it at a top level, but maybe take it down another level if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, let's put an asterisk next to 2027 or scare quotes around it. Xi Jinping told his military in intercepted comms repeatedly, be ready to go as early as 2027. They watched what happened with none of our national security friends or open source intelligence friends think it's going to be the stroke of midnight in 2027. There's a couple of ways I can give you some timing here, but that's where it comes from is
Okay. Mm-hmm.
if they're going to start throwing punches as early as 2027, we better be able to take a punch as early as 2027. I haven't even mentioned some of the no water, no hospital, no kidding stuff. So we should get to some domestic impact in a minute. But so far, everything the Chinese military and Chinese government have said they're going to do in cyber, they've done. Like it started with the Google Aurora, like massive vacuum cleaner of intellectual property. We call them APTs or whatnot. But they have a consistent track record of following through on their plans, and they're slow. They think longer, they think further out, and they do them. And so far, they've got 100% track record. So I think we can get into why is Xi Jinping doing this, why the timing. There's lots of answers to those questions.
Sure.
But generally speaking, it's pretty treacherous to cross the Taiwan Straits. There's 2 weeks, two periods a year where it's more favorable. Maybe I'm giving you more than you're asking for, but it's very fresh on my mind after this week. But one of them is there's a 5-week period in mid-March where it's favorable conditions to cross the straits and take Taiwan. There's a 3-week period in September. So whatever year it is, it's probably March or September.
Those dates. Okay.
And it's been a fluid situation of is he going to wait for the next presidency or try to hit during this presidency? But he has to do it during his leadership time and his health and to cement his legacy amongst Mao and others. So it's fluctuated, but if you were to ask me today, the over-under is it's probably March of 2028 or March of 2029. They see this as the most permissive presidency and administration they're going to encounter. I'm not making a political point. I'm telling you how they're thinking. And they think we're pretty distracted with Venezuela, with Iran, with possibly Cuba, and we have fewer friends than we used to. So they look at this as we need to be ready to take a punch, probably March of 28, maybe March 29, during a period where all of our political appointees are in flux.
Yeah, potentially. Right.
So I spent more time on timing than I meant. But look, I also get really pissed off every time I have this conversation. I get pissed off at myself because whether it's accidents like CrowdStrike or adversaries like China, Iran, Russia, the next shooting match is going to be a hybrid conflict. We live in glass houses. If rocks are thrown, we're going to have a lot of broken glass. And I'm so tired of us debating when someone will or won't go. Perhaps you're thinking we'll just let them take Taiwan or this or that. It could be Iran, which is happening in real time right now.
Right.
And just this week, at the time of recording, we had our first retaliation on U.S. designated critical infrastructure, right? A major medical supplier and medical device manufacturer on U.S. soil. It's pretty outrageous.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the last. So what you can see here is whether it's China, Iran, Russia, or a terrorist group or an accidental software update, we are overdependent on undependable technologies that affect life and limb, right? You can go 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 days without water, 30 days without food. But our most fragile exposed critical infrastructure is water. And no water has severe second and third order effects, like no water, no hospital, no kidding. In 2 to 4 hours, hospitals cannot function without water for HVAC, for surgery scrubbing, for sanitation, toilet flushing, fire suppression. If you're in Arizona in the summer, you got to evacuate in 45 minutes, the entire building, because it's an oven with no HVAC.
Right.
So we've been doing disaster crisis simulations for hospitals to show that it's not your fault, but it's still your problem. And we have a really surgical theory of change. That timing says we have time. We're not powerless. There's things we can do if we're intelligent about ruthless prioritization, consequence identification, and doing common sense things. It may be a good catalyst as well to reevaluate have we been doing cyber the right way this whole time, or could we be more consequence focused?
One of the things when you were last on, and again, it's been a little bit of time that's passed, we did talk about critical infrastructure relative to water systems.
Yeah.
And you've been talking about that now as well. But I mean, we've seen examples of where there's been, impact. To me, it almost seems like it's just kind of like little simple test scenarios because it hasn't been extremely impactful of the things that you feel the reality could strike. It's almost like, kind of these situations you talked about earlier, like, hey, they put the little kind of time bombs sitting in certain places ready to detonate when they need to do so. But this impact is just something I don't think people are really kind of wrapping their arms around this holistically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big consequence analysis guy, and a huge part of our Undisruptable 27 project. By the way, I probably should do the 60 seconds on that.
Sure. Yeah.
Look, even if you don't know about Taiwan, you've seen more disruptions, larger disruptions, longer disruptions, life safety disruptions from accidents like the CrowdStrike outage or adversaries who want money, right?
Yes.
Lots of hospitals, airlines, you name it. It's disrupted to payroll, disrupted to patient care. Normal humans don't use the words like breach and TTPs. They just feel disrupted.
Mhm.
So what happens when you add weapons of war? So if we have a fast moving, elevated threat context where someone wants to disrupt or destroy infrastructure, not take money and get a ransom, but disrupt and destroy, then we have some time to do something. So that's the project. We want to be undisruptible, at least where it matters most by 2027, or at least less disruptible. If the punches are thrown, can you take the punch and continue to perform your vital mission? So we also said when everything's critical, nothing is. So coming out of my Cisco task force work, I basically looked and said there's like a handful of functions that if you shut them off for 24 to 48 hours, people die. It's things like water, access to emergency care, power, emergency comms, food supply is a little bit more forgiving, but only a little. And mostly these would also drive societal unrest and panic. Lord of the Flies, right? We're really orderly until we think there's scarcity, and then there's no toilet paper, but there's also maybe people arming up. So we want to buy a little bit of time for towns to respond if we did have a disruption. And so that's the project. To your point, though, yeah, we had isolated, sporadic. We had Oldsmar, Florida, maybe hacked, maybe not. The Cyber Army of Russia-born criminal group did overflow some water tanks in Texas as part of one of their compromises of some HMIs and whatnot, covered by Wired. You already knew those. There's some in Europe and some in the UK. Those were pretty known. The Cyber Avengers, after the conflict, the October 7th issues in Israel, Cyber Avengers, a pro-Palestinian group, hacked Unitronics equipment in Pennsylvania and 22 other states in the US. So those were more like protest defacement. But Volt Typhoon came and was revealed later because it was intending to harm, the intention to harm. There's a 60 Minutes piece on Littleton, Massachusetts, near my home.
Yeah.
10,000 person town, no military, no strategic manufacturing. It's targeted and compromised to sow chaos on U.S. civilian infrastructure. They spent like $15,000 re-architecting their network. I don't know how or what they prioritized. I wish they'd offered a bit more advice. But generally speaking, what I'm asking us to do is, here's some sobering stats for you. There's 151,000 water facilities in the U.S., a bunch more wastewater. 151,000. A third of them support residential customers.
Okay.
There's only 650 of them voluntarily in the ISAC, the Information Sharing Analysis Center. We have a 0.4% participation rate, and there's no mandatory standards like PCI. There's no vendors selling there because there's no money there, right? So what we have is incredibly prone majority of U.S. water that they can hit when and where and how they want. So I have to be ruthless in my prioritization. I say, you know what's a more tractable bit? There's 6,000 of those support one of the nation's hospitals. So I'm aimed exclusively at one of the 6,000 hospital zip codes to say, if their water's compromised, let's not add cyber they don't have time for, or talent or budget they don't have time for. Let's initially add engineering. So I'm taking a page out of INL. Idaho National Labs has this CIE or cyber informed engineering. And it's a very elaborate, very detailed rubric and training and philosophy on engineering and deployment. But if I really boil it down, what they say is you should look at what's the worst consequences that can happen. If you want to reduce the likelihood of a compromise, you add cyber. But if you want to reduce the consequences, you add engineering. So we're going to these water towns, these hospital towns, and saying, what's the worst that could happen? And it's usually a burst water main on the pressure zone of the hospital. Well, do we have engineering solutions that can fix that? Yep. A pressure sensor arrestor, a pressure release valve, maybe a kill switch. So they have ideas, and depending on their equipment, their topography, their users, we kind of co-create engineering band-aids for maybe a $2,000 or $20 instead of $2 million on cyber. Of course we care about cyber, but let's make sure the worst punch can't knock out your hospital. And then let's crawl, walk, run on practical, pragmatic cyber assistance and interventions with CISA, with others, with free donations from vendors. Quite a few vendors are willing to offer free or at cost services, especially to these water hospital towns. So I'm packing a lot in here. I realize that, but it's just stunning to me how much we focus on our day job, or enterprise? Do you think your enterprise is going to meet its objectives if its employees can't get to work or can't get hydrated or can't get medical
Exactly.
care?
Yeah.
So I think we can apply what we know in our native skills to think about incident management, resilience, availability, ruthless prioritization, drilling. We can add these to our incident response playbooks. I know you're going to have a question on that. So, but like the things we can do, we're not helpless. And what we're trying to model through this water hospital nexus and engineering is something you can rinse and repeat for your enterprise as well, or for your data center, right?
Right.
I'd be remiss not to overtly say this. Undisruptable 27 has funding to directly assist 12 hospital towns for free to make sure that if your town is punched, you can take that punch. We're going to innovate narrowly on these 12 and replicate widely to the other 6,000 hospital towns. But there is still time for you to nominate your community or your parents' community. So yes, get involved in the website. Yes, sign up for the Slack. Yes, sign up for our monthly newsletter. But be selfish and figure out if we can work together to protect your community. Go to undisruptable27.org and we'd love to talk.
Josh, a little bit personal, but with everything that you do, with all the insights you have, I mean, I have to ask you, do you truly have trouble sleeping at night?
You know, every time I reflexively, whenever someone says, what keeps you up at night? I try to invert it and say, what gets me out of bed in the morning? Every day I wake up, I want to save lives. And I want to do the most neglected, highest consequence thing that can affect the life and liberty of the people I care about and the free world. So whether this was my job, whether I had funding or not, like I'm going to be paying attention to these trends. I'm going to be thinking about them. And I can either be a spectator who's worrying, or I can be rolling up my sleeves and saying, what can I do? And what can I inspire others to do? I think nihilism is looking at these things and getting overwhelmed and defeating. I'm not certain our plans will work, but I have agency. I have talents. I have options, and I can try things. And just like a good hacker, you know, we can fail fast and iterate. We can experiment. We can get others to do so in parallel. So when I see there's a rush line in a world where I feel so small, I can't help thinking big, right? It's the whole zeitgeist of I Am the Cavalry was, if the cavalry isn't coming to save you, you can either be depressed and overwhelmed by that, or you can realize it's incredibly empowering because I'm going to have to stand on my own 2 feet and fight for my own interests. And I am not powerless. So you can treat that as overwhelming or empowering. And I know which one I've chosen. And yes, these things stress me out, but what would stress me out more is not being in the fight.
Josh, so, you know, one of the things that I always like to do towards the end of our conversations is allow the audience to walk away with that one thing. There's been a lot of things you've already covered, right? But what's that one thing that they really should put their time and energy into to help wherever organization, or even from a personal perspective for themselves? What's that one thing they should really, again, be focused on?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat. Like if you think of yourself as a parent, the one thing you should be doing is ask yourself, do I have enough water or food or ability to weather a 3-week period or so with a water disruption? So be very selfish, protect your loved ones. Don't look at this as your day job or your profession. Like, what do I have to do? And I think once your household is safe, then you can say, I hope you get involved in the Undisruptable Slack and the Undisruptable 27 mailing list, because we're continuing to socialize and publish 1-pagers, 2-pagers, how-to kits on various aspects of this. Like, here's 5 questions you should ask at your town hall meeting, or here's how you can introduce your hospital. So protect your household first, maybe your town second. In your day jobs, or if you're an owner operator, the one piece of advice I would give is, you know, beyond getting educated on the typhoon situation and timing, I would say you already have BCDRS incident response playbooks. Let's make a typhoon scenario for that, a Volt Typhoon scenario of what if we went without water. Let's also call your insurers, because I'm doing a lot on the side with the insurance industry, and people think their insurance will cover them on their worst day here. These are either acts of war exclusions or infrastructure outage exclusions. You should verify any assumptions you have about your insurer's ability to cover the costs of these harms, which are already after the harm, or to even engage and assist you at scale when everyone's on fire. So I know I'm giving you too many, but make sure your household is resilient as a citizen. Make sure your town is aware and engaged with our materials as a part of your community. And as an employee, think about your BCDRS and incident response and insurance assumptions related to Volt Typhoon, because you may surface and shatter assumptions pretty quickly. And my team's giving you seed questions that can help.
That's great. And as we've been talking along, when we kind of got to this question here, I was already thinking in my mind, that personal perspective first and foremost. So thanks for shining the light on that, truly coming in and helping the audience understand the unfortunate reality of what we're living in today, but more importantly, the actions they should be taking for themselves, for their communities. And then thereafter, it kind of leads to the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's really hard to help your community and your employer when you're looking over your shoulder at your house.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And even the example you just called out of, hey, take a look into your insurance policies, because you're probably not covered for what potentially is coming your way. That's another great call out. So Josh, it's a pleasure. We'll have you on again. There's no question about that. This is only the second time around, but there's so much more we can talk about. And it's always great talking to you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Yeah, let me get a few blueprints and I'll come back and share them.
That was Josh Corman. If you want to learn more about the work Josh mentioned, including the Undisruptable 27 initiative, you can find links and resources in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Reimagining Cyber, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.